Good evening. I'm Chris Matthews in Washington. Let me start tonight with this. Somebody's got to break it to Mr. Boehner. Your side lost. Romney, remember him? He's the guy who ran on the rich man's platform, the hands off the big boys ticket. He's the guy who said to his fellow 2%ers, got your backs, while telling the 47% in the other direction to go fly a kite. So, Mr. Boehner, ye of limited memory, the voters looked this issue directly in the eye. They heard the president blaring away about the need to hit that 2% with their Clinton-era tax rates. They heard your guy, Romney, playing palace guard for the plutocrats, and they said, I think I'll vote for the guy who's looking out for the middle class. I think I'll let that guy go back to Boehner or whatever. Time for Mr. Boehner to stop defending his rejected politics, stop talking about the rich and threatening more fights to defend them. This election was clean, its results clear, its winner right there in the White House now, trying to do what the people re-elected him to do. Joy Reid's managing editor of the Griot and David Corn's Washington Bureau Chief for Mother Jones and author of the ebook, 47%. Both are MSNBC political analysts. I like the way I lowered my voice there. Well, anyway, today, the president took his tax pitch to a factory in the Philly suburbs, and he made clear that the rich must pay their fair share, meaning taxes will go up for the top 2%. Obama's job number one, a tax cut for the 98%, the rest of the people. Let's listen to him.
It's not acceptable to me, and I don't think it's acceptable to you, for just a handful of Republicans in Congress to hold middle-class tax cuts hostage simply because they don't want tax rates on upper-income folks to go up. All right? That doesn't make sense. The Senate has already passed a bill to keep income taxes from going up on middle-class families. That's already passed the Senate. Your members of Congress, like Allison and Shaka, other Democrats in the House, they're ready to go. They're ready to vote on that same thing. And if we can just get a few House Republicans on board, we can pass the bill in the House, it will land on my desk, and I am ready. I've got a bunch of pens ready to sign this bill.
And 30 minutes after the president was finished there, House Speaker John Boehner held a press conference. He left unanswered the president's call for decoupling that 98% from the richest 2%, and he gave a pessimistic assessment of the negotiations. Let's listen to Mr. Boehner.
There's a stalemate. Let's not kid ourselves. But when I come out the day after the election and make it clear that Republicans will put revenue on the table, I took a great risk. And then the White House spends 3 weeks trying to develop a proposal, and they send one up here that calls for $1.6 trillion in new taxes, calls for a little, not even $400 billion in cuts, and they want to have this extra spending that's actually greater than the amount they're willing to cut. I mean, it was not a serious proposal, and so. Right now, we're almost nowhere.
Let me start with Joy on this thing, because you and I often agree. If we don't, we don't. Then we'll live with that. But this whole thing here, I just think Boehner has never accepted the fact that the rates have to go up at the top. I mean, there's this thing about deductions and all this finesse. They lost the debate. This was fought about. If there was any issue that came out of the campaign, the president's dead right on this. He made his case clear. The polls now, as of right now, show it. The public wants to have some tax fairness. They don't want the top 2% to hold this thing up. Boehner doesn't want to hear that. Why not? Is he unable to hear it? Does he not want to hear it? Or is he afraid of his own people in the party, the people in that sort of ideological zoo he's got to deal with up there that won't let him do what he wants to do and has to do, which is cut a damn deal before Christmas?
I think it's the latter, Chris. I think that John Boehner is in a nightmare situation. It could not be a cleaner case for Republicans defending only the tax cuts for the top 2%. This is very clear. Mitt Romney tried to parse it and say, well, maybe we'll get revenue from capping deductions. Maybe we'll go after the mortgage interest or some other deductions. That was litigated. They lost. This is very simple and very clear to everyone that 98% of those tax cuts could go through tomorrow, today, in an hour, any time that Boehner just got out of the way. But he's still got the rejectionists in the lame duck caucus, and I think he's just a little bit afraid that that right flank might come at that speakership that he has to re-up for on January 3rd. He's still got to talk the Tea Party talk, even though he knows it's a losing proposition.
Let me ask you, I know you're progressive, and that's why I love you. But the fact of the matter is here, let's talk politics.
Yeah.
Why does a political party that hopes to get 51% of the country in the next presidential election, in the next congressional election, put all its stock in 2%?
Well, you're dealing with reality. The reality.
Yeah.
No, the Tea Party caucus of the House went from 55 to 51
But
to
they're not
52.
rich people, these Tea Party people.
It doesn't matter. They are against taxes because they think it fuels government, and they're against government. They're against compromise. They're particularly against compromise with this particular president for a whole host of reasons. And we have the same dynamic we had back in 2011 when John Boehner, I think left to his own devices, would cut a deal within 5 minutes with the president.
Okay, let's talk about it. You and I disagree about the importance of the cliff. I think the cliff's damn serious business, darn serious business, because who knows what the world's going to react to this? We don't know what the world's going to do. Let's try this.
The markets
we don't know.
like it.
We
Right.
don't know. Forget the market.
Right.
The world economy doesn't know what we're going to. My question is this: would the Republican Party like to go over the cliff, hanging on to that 2% rich people, and say that's why they did it? Can they live with themselves if they do that?
They have, in some ways, the politics for Boehner becomes easier. I don't like calling it a cliff. After you go out down the slope,
Why?
whatever you want to call it, because if nothing happens between now and the end of the year, all the tax cuts, poof, they disappear. You come back the first week in January and you pass a bill
for the 98%.
Then the Tea Partiers, Boehner can make the argument to them if they want to be reasonable. Now you're voting for a tax cut, not for everyone, but for 98%. Before that happens, the Tea Party people will say, we're voting to raise taxes on the rich. If you let it happen on its own, Boehner, listen.
Do you buy this, Joy? You people the people don't get what's going on. They know what the mechanics of this thing
They don't
are.
want
the people who pay attention.
Let me just finish 1 second. The Tea Partiers have to worry, some of them, about being challenged from the right if they vote for anything resembling a tax hike. If you wait to after the slope hits, you can say it's not a tax hike.
Well, Chris,
so that may help.
I think you're really playing down the intelligence of the people on the right, that they don't know what's going on.
I'm not giving a lot of credit.
I think they do get it. I think they know what a tax increase is, whatever it is, and they know also what a fiscal cliff is. And they disagree on that, and they do worry. If this market crashes in the world, and every country in the world's watching us like a bunch of crazy people,
they were willing to do this in the
we
debt
disagree on
ceiling.
this.
They were willing to do this in the debt ceiling.
And the rich Republicans are blamed for it. That's why I think a lot of the rich people in Wall Street are saying to Boehner, stop it already.
Right.
We can live with the little tax increase. We're loaded up here. Just move on and don't screw up the economy, because we're going to lose a lot more money if this market crashes to a second great recession.
Well, I mean, Chris, I think to some extent the market has priced in the notion that we would go over the fiscal cliff for a little while.
No, you're wrong.
They've priced it a little bit. I think for a little while,
I think
not for 6 months.
Everybody, who are you talking to? I keep talking to people and they tell me that, who are you talking to?
No, I actually spoke with a source the other day who's in Washington. He's an attorney who said, listen, people that he's speaking to that are on lawyer, but speaks to a lot of folks that are Wall Street types who said, look, the market could take it for a couple of weeks. We're not talking about months.
The cake is baked, and they think the intelligence of politicians is up to this challenge.
But that I think that Wall Street doesn't really have a lot of faith in this process to be able to get done. And so they've priced in just a little bit that this could happen for a while. Maybe not for months, but you wouldn't see the market necessarily crash like the next day. You'd have time. And I think if they came back on January 3rd and they didn't have a deal, you'd be able to sustain it for a while, because they do a deal really quickly because they don't want the consequences.
Look, this isn't an ideological difference. This is a matter of perception and worldview. I believe that they don't have a deal as we approach the 21st of this month, 3 weeks from now. If they don't have a deal by then, the thing starts cracking, it's going to start melting, and you're going to see that market going down and down every day. And that's not a joke.
No, it's not a joke, and it may happen, but you have
question is who gets blamed.
You have to remember, back in the summer of 2011, the Tea Partiers in Congress, some were advocating for that. Others were saying, we don't care if it happens. So Boehner has the same problem. The markets may scream, the Wall Streeters may say, don't do this. That doesn't mean it's going to have an impact.
And Chris, you
let's get to the question. We get back to something we all agree on: equity here. An article on today's New York Times front page is fascinating. Its headline: complaints aside, most face a lower tax burden than in the Reagan 80s. It reports that the richest Americans, the people of the top on this chart, making more than $350,000, were by far the greatest beneficiaries of the tax cuts over the last 30 years. Meanwhile, at the bottom, the least fortunate, those making less than $25,000, barely saw any tax cut at all. So it's interesting that you see an objective study here, David, that shows that what most people think, which is the top's gotten a really good deal from these tax cuts.
You know, don't bother us with facts. I mean, again and again,
it's very timely.
The president has been arguing for the last 2 years that the rich can't afford to go back to the Clinton rates, And we see that with many studies. We see also that when you cut rates at the top, it doesn't always correspond to economic growth. The data is not there to support the right's position, but they believe it as if it's theology.
Okay, let's go to politics. We also agree. I think Boehner's playing a very dangerous game here, and I don't know why he's playing it, but maybe you guys can help me here. Boehner says we're not only going to face this fiscal cliff, we're facing endless fights over debt ceilings from now on. There's going to be this regular thing, this, Vegematic. Every couple of days we're going to have to go through this whole thing. In other words, he's saying to the liberals who might be willing to go along with the deal, Joy, even if you go along with this, there'll be more to pay in 2 months in February. Then we'll have to do more in a few months after that. So he's making it very difficult for the president to convince his progressives, maybe we got to give a little, because wait a minute, if I give here on Medicare, I'm going to have to give again in a month, and then another month. It looks horrible for both. And then the other side, he's saying, oh boy, this is going to be fun. Now maybe he's playing to his right-wing crowd, saying, don't worry, if we don't get a big apple bite this time, we'll get another bite out of these people next month.
Right.
Who's he playing to when he says we're going to have more trouble down the road?
I think you got to remember that the cross currents facing Boehner include not just sort of the Tea Party crazies that are in his caucus, but the right-wing donor class is very hard right on this ideological issue of never seeing any tax increases. And the Republican, just the campaign committees, if you compare the Republican Congressional Campaign Committee with the DCCC that raises for the House Democrats, the Republicans are far more reliant on big donors, where the Democrats have a bigger small donor base. So Republicans really do have to constantly cater to a very hard right-wing donor class that wants to hear this message. They don't want to hear Boehner capitulate. Look, if you go and read a lot of the right-wing sites, like, again, not the crazy ones, but the regular ones, they're already teeing up to say Boehner is a failure, he's capitulating, he gave in to Obama. They want to hear him talk the talk. And I think while he still has the rejectionists in hand in the lame duck caucus, and while he still has that donor class that wants to hear this conservative rhetoric, he's still got to play the game. Behind the scenes, I think Republicans understand they're going to lose that top rate fight. They're going to lose that, and I wouldn't be surprised if they wound up putting the debt ceiling into the deal at the end. But up until the moment they make the deal, he's got to talk the talk.
But
if I was only interested in right-wing money and only interested in money at the top, I would say that's all true, and therefore the faster they make a deal, the better. Because if they're going to cut the rate anyway, or raise the rate anyway, get it over with.
It'll be better for Republicans if they made a deal now.
Boehner can make a better deal now. The question is whether anyone in his party will let him do
this
that.
is going to continue next week. Thank you, Joy Reid. Thank you, David Coyne. We agree on almost everything except it is a cliff. Coming up,